Yo, welcome to the first training video of the series where I'm going to go over some basic techniques, inside, outside, cleanup, just the straight basics. Down to bare bones, scrub the window, squeegee the window off. We use this is traditional cleaning, so we're going to use a mop head and a squeegee. You'll use the mop head to mop the dirt off of the windows, and then the squeegee to squeegee the water off the windows. So starting off here, we've got a large floor to like probably 6-7 foot window, and we're not gonna need a pole for any of this. Go over pole technique in another video. So what I do here is I start out and I scrub the window. This one's not really that dirty, just getting the dirt off of it. And then I come back with the squeegee, and it's important to note that I start from the very top. Obviously, you start from the top down. When you start from the top, you want to scrape that top edge. When you scrape the top edge, it's going to take all that water off and not leave any drips at the top. We're still probably going to have to rag at the end, but if you do it right and you put enough pressure up there, it will take all the water off. And with enough pressure and enough practice, you won't have to rag it as much. Coming down, you can see that I just frame out the window. Basically, I'm sliding down the sides. So I'll go up and then I'll slide down one side. Again, come back up and slide down the other side until I get to the bottom where right here, I just end it. And now there are a bunch of different ways to end it, but ending it on the bottom is the safest way to end it with and get pretty consistent results every single time. This next clip is a door frame. Here you can really see where I get in the corners. And I just trace that top edge and get in the very corner. I left a little bit there, but we can get that with a rag later. And you can see I come back up and redo the corner. Those are very important because the most obvious problem that you're gonna have when you first start out is the drips from the top. So you can see I just frame the window and then end it. End it on the bottom, it's always the safest way to end it. And then on this particular window, I come back and I squeegee the black area that separates the top and the bottom window. Don't leave the drips down there. It's a clear indicator of an amateur cleaner if you don't clean everything that you get wet. Now you might have noticed that I always keep my mop head below me. That's to catch all of the water that runs off. If you do this, you can catch up to 90% of the water that you're gonna drop off. And especially on the insides, outside's not so much not as important, but on the insides, you're gonna wanna contain all that water from splattering all over the place. On the outside, I usually use this technique to not have to go back to the bucket every 5 seconds to get more water. If you use this technique right, you can do an entire side of a building with one dip of the water. You're not going back and forth to the bucket and wasting time doing that. You can catch the runoff water and use it to clean until the whole side of the building is done. Now this next one demonstrates that a little bit more. You can see that there's almost no drops coming down to the sill. And this has a second effect of saving our rags. When you go through as many locations as we have, you're gonna go through a lot of rags. And using this technique is gonna save you a ton of rags, because not only are you keeping the water and saving it for other windows, but the rag will get soaked and you can't use it again until you wash it if you're cleaning up the entirety of what you put on the window. As you can see here, I've scrubbed it down. These aren't as dirty because they're inside a entryway. They're not outside exposed to all the dirt and stuff. So I give it a light scrub. And then the circular movement that you saw there when I first started is I start in the middle and then I whip it around. Now what this does is it gets all the dirt that's on the squeegee that would leave streaks and lines. It gets that off of there. So when I start in the middle, I kind of smack it on the window to get the dirt off, and then I whip it around. That way all the dirt, when I whip it around, when I smack it, it smacks here, and then I whip it around, that dirt stays here, and we'll come get that later, and it'll eventually go to the sill. So when I start, I go from the side to the corner. The corners on the top, like I said, are very important. The corners at the top are gonna be your biggest drip spots. So I'll get those probably 1 or 2 times. Usually this time I only got 1. But as you can see, I retrace that and then come back down. So this one, if it's a traditional window and it's only, as big as you can go corner, corner, trace down, and then clean up that middle in that swipe motion. And on this particular window, it has a sill that comes out a little bit farther than normal. So on these, when you end it on that, I'll go over this a little later on the interior section, but when you end on that, you want to go a little bit slower and then get your fingers out of the way so you can get perfectly parallel to that sill. Now when I come across the sill, I use my blade and I use the squeegee blade, and I wipe the top down and then come back around and get that front side. And as you can see, it leaves a perfectly clean sill. That is the #1 thing, especially on silver sills, that people look at. If you have leftover water or drips on the front, that is a clear indicator that you're a straight amateur. So this also has an added benefit of saving your rags, just like the water catching technique. When you have to wipe up an entire pool of water, you'll get 3 or 4 windows in, and then that rag will be soaked. And for a bigger job, for a normal sized job, you're probably gonna go through 2 or 3 rags, which, I mean, with a limited amount of rags, an entire day could take up all your rags if you don't do that. Now on this particular outside window, it is a pretty big window and it would be kind of tricky to clean it all the way across. So what I do here is I split it up in half. Even though it's one pane, I split it up in half and clean it top to bottom. I'll finish on that side. I won't get a very formal finish on that because I know I'm gonna come back later and clean that other side. So I'll move over and then start working on that little sliver that I left. And obviously these aren't too dirty, so I don't have to scrub that hard. But here you see I don't catch all the water on that window and go all the way over. Now why I do this is if you go all the way over on that to the clean side from your dirty side, you're going to, 99% of the time, when you bring the squeegee down, it's gonna leave a trail, a circular trail of water when you come down because you have too much water on the squeegee. So what I'll do is if I have this much, I'll clean 1/2 of it and then come back around and get that other half. That way the squeegee's dry. So I'll clean that, wipe that pretty hard so that it gets the squeegee dry, and then come back up. And in this video, I come back up from the bottom and then squeegee back over to the clean side we just did. When you come back up from the bottom in this type of motion, the water stays here, and then your squeegee will come up around it and leave that water here, so your top 3 inches of that squeegee is gonna be dry. So you come back up and you come over and then go straight back down. And then pretty typical stuff here, frame out that outside and then end on the bottom. This is a really good example of when you should probably end on the bottom. Since we end on the bottom, we're already in position to scrape the sill with the squeegee. So as you can see here, I clean out the squeegee and I scrape that sill. Typically I won't do the front side of outside sills. And this is usually because it won't leave a mark. If it's a silver sill, I always will. And also, it's because when you squeegee down on the ground, you'll typically drag that edge. And when you drag that edge on the concrete, it will dull the blade faster than you normally would. So I would really not recommend doing that unless it's absolutely necessary. Now here's just a little bit of rag work, getting the top edge of that sill so we don't get any top drips. And then here's a nice little slow-mo of what exactly the sill wipe does. It leaves a perfect clean sill, so we don't have to get the rag out. Moving on here, I want to show a little bit of inside cleaning, and this is different from outside cleaning. Outside we can be a little bit messy, and obviously it's going to evaporate because it's outside. But on the inside, nobody wants water or drips or anything, especially in homes, on the floor, on the sills, on anything. So what I want to start out with here is a little bit of squeegee prep and wash wand prep before you go in there. And now in this particular clip, I get a little bit of, so this is coming straight from the outside, and I get a little bit of a motion in the bucket to kind of wash that dirt off. And then once I get that out of there, I'll pretty much hand squeeze the water off one way. And this is really important. At the end of it, you want to squeeze it because a lot of the water is going to be trapped at the end. So when you go down it, you want to squeeze at the end and then flip that thing over, do it one more time, and then squeeze the other end. That way it's going to have the perfect amount of dryness on the wash wand. Now I start off cleaning these interior glass panes, and these are actually a pain because you see every single imperfection. On these interior glass panes, it's really important to do one side and just take a look at it, but don't be too critical of that one side because the other side is going to be the indicator of exactly how clean the window is. So starting off here, I drag that top edge exactly like the outside. And on this one, notice how my wash wand is underneath me, the scrubber. The scrubber is underneath me at all times on the interior, all times on the interior. This is gonna save you from drips on the floor, it's gonna save you rags, and it's gonna make you look more professional. Now this is really, really important. So on that silver sill, I put the wash wand right up against the sill and then squeegee at an angle so that the water comes off. The squeegee's here, the wash wand's here, and the squeegee's here. I have it at an angle so that it's dragging the water always on the squeegee. It'll drag that water on the squeegee, and it's exactly like keeping it on the bottom, but then you save all the sill water. When you save all the sill water, you don't have very much rag use. You're not gonna get a billion rags wet on the inside like typical cleaners would when they have drop cloths or rags. And it's also gonna allow you to clean the entire inside without going back to the bucket. Now here's that typical hand-high window. I do the circle technique again. So on this one, it's not as dirty, so I'm not gonna smack it on the window as hard, but immediately when I put it on there, I'm gonna put the wash wand at the bottom, have it positioned at the bottom, and then do the flip. So when you do the flip, it's gonna sling some water, but it usually hits the side of the sill. So we'll go over that when we go over rag technique. And usually that water is gonna make its way to the bottom. But doing that flip technique, the benefits of doing that, getting all the dirt off, are far outweigh getting a little bit of water on the sill there. So as you can see, I start from the top, drag that edge, frame out the sides, and then this one's super easy, end on the bottom. And you notice that sill comes out a little bit farther, so I take a little bit more time, because if you go fast, you're gonna leave these the blade's gonna hop a little bit, and you're gonna leave these drag marks. So if you take a little bit more time, kind of shift your hand back, and then slowly end on that bottom, you're gonna have a perfect end every single time. So here's a tricky situation. This is a door with a push bar. So some of these push bars are far enough out where you can get the scrubber behind it. So when you get the scrubber behind it, it's gonna pool some water up on that. Make sure you wipe that off, because someone's gonna grab it and they're gonna get water on their hands. So you put it behind the push bar and then give it a couple scrubs, because behind the push bar is gonna be the dirtiest part of the window. That's where everyone's fingerprints hit and then drag to grab that push bar. So you're gonna have a lot of fingerprints on there. I would recommend going 2 or 3 times on it, scrubbing that, and then getting the rest of the top of that window. So as you can see here, I do the very similar technique where drag the top, frame the sides, and then on this particular window, you can fit both the wash wand and the squeegee behind it. So I will go a little bit beneath, if the bar is here, I'll go a little bit beneath the bar and then drag it to the side, not worrying about the bottom, because we do that in 2 separate sections. Even though it's one window, we do it in 2 separate sections. So here I'll end on the side because it's much easier and we can't end on the bottom. Now moving on to the bottom, I kind of overlap the scrubber. I'll go up a little bit more and overlap the scrubber just to get, 1, get the residual fingerprints, and 2, to get the dirty line of water there is not gonna be that great to grab just dry, because it's probably gonna leave a little bit of streaks just because there's dirt in there from the top window. So I'll go under there, pick that up with the scrubber, and then go on scrubbing the rest of the bottom of the window. And pay particular attention to the bottom of the windows here, because this is gonna be where kids touch the most, because they can't reach the push bar, and or dogs or whatever can hit that bottom. So give it a couple extra scrubs, because that's gonna be the dirtiest part. And then go up above the push bar. So overlap the push bar, come across, and then just frame out the window like you normally would. And on this one, I'm gonna end on the side there. Now on these particular windows, they use dry erase markers and they touch the windows a lot. So in this case, if there's anything that's stuck on there after the first clean, like a hard fingerprint or maybe a mark from a marker, then what I'll do is I'll take a rag, usually the dirty rag, and I will scrub it extra hard with the dirty rag, because you can only put so much pressure on that wash wand. It's distributed over a large area, so you're not gonna get a lot of pressure. So I'll either flip the wash wand sideways and then hit it with the end, or I'll take the rag and then I'll put a lot of pressure just to get that off. And here I kind of do a once over of the entire window just to be sure that there's nothing else there. And then go about cleaning it in the normal way I would like an exterior window. Just drag that top there, drag it again, come back down, catch the water at all times. You can see there are very few times where the scrubber is not completely under the squeegee. Now on this one, this is a good example here. I'm gonna go back and explain this. What I did here is I didn't wet the bottom of the window. I just cleaned the first top. You don't always have to wet the entire window and then clean that, especially on the exteriors when it's a particularly hot day or you don't have enough water. And in this instance, I think I was running low on water. And what I would do here is clean the top and then leave a nice line on the bottom so you know exactly where you stopped off, and then scrub over that line and then keep scrubbing, and that way you're gonna have the same clean you would have on the top on the bottom. You're not running out of water on the very bottom. Another thing I'd like to touch on, especially for homes, there's very few instances where commercial cleans will have this, and if you do, it's probably maybe one window or so. But on this one, they had a desk of phones and a lot of electronics. So what I'll do here is pay extra careful attention to what's going on and prep the area first. So what I mean by prepping the area is I want to move all those electronics out of the way of any splatter or anything, just in case, because we don't want to fry anything. If you fry something, you got to pay for it. So that's it for basic techniques. We'll go over different styles of cleaning in another video. That is just a basic rundown of how you will clean a typical window, about 90% of them. And we'll go over pull technique, ragging, and everything in the later ones, and see you there.